A few years ago, I was at this semiconductor summit in The Hague. It's, just a short drive from the ASML headquarters.
The heart of the industry, really.
Exactly. And the mood in the room, whenever the topic of Chinese self-sufficiency came up, it was almost dismissive.
I can imagine.
I remember one senior analyst, he was leaning back, swirling his coffee, and he told me that China building an extreme ultraviolet lithography machine was like, and I'm quoting here, trying to recreate the sun in a backyard shed.
Wow. That's quite an image.
He laughed. He insisted the supply chain alone was this Gordian knot that would take Beijing 30 years to untie if they ever managed it at all. To everyone in that room, it wasn't just a challenge. It was a physical and economic impossibility.
And that was the consensus for a long, long time.
It was. But then you fast forward, you look inside this high security facility in Shenzhen, early 2025. There are no press tours, no grand unveilings, just this low, persistent hum of massive cooling fans.
And a team of engineers.
A team of engineers, and what's really interesting is that some of them used to wear ASML badges, and they're just staring intensely at a series of monitors.
And the machine in front of them isn't the sleek, polished product you'd see in a Dutch clean room.
Not at all. It's sprawling. It's described as somewhat crude, a labyrinth of mirrors and complex piping that fills an entire hall. But then the system fires. A specific, intense pulse of 13.5 nanometer light hits the silicon. It's a working operational prototype. And in that moment, the Western consensus didn't just crack, it shattered.
It completely vaporized.
And what's truly striking isn't just the technical milestone, it's the staggering irony of the situation. For years, Washington used choke point sanctions, like a surgical strike, right?
The idea was to starve China of the high-end chips needed for the AI revolution.
The logic was simple. If they can't buy the tools, they can't join the race. But you look at what's happening in that facility, what many are calling China's Manhattan Project, and you start to see a completely different narrative.
By closing the door to the global market.
Did the West inadvertently remove the option of dependency? It makes you wonder if the very sanctions meant to cripple China's tech industry actually acted as the ultimate accelerant, forcing a nation to build in 7 years what the rest of the world thought would take 30. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Our mission today is to unpack exactly how that technical impossibility turned into an operational prototype in Shenzhen years ahead of global predictions.
We're really going to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
We are. We're diving deep into the systematic advantages, the strategic genius of this resource mobilization, and, the focused human capital that enabled this breakthrough. This is really about understanding the sheer power of state-mandated synergy when it's applied to the most difficult engineering challenge in the world.
And what's fascinating here is the almost unimaginable scale of the technical achievement we're discussing. When we talk about the Western consensus that this was impossible, that wasn't based on, simple protectionism. It was based on the staggering complexity of extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV. It truly sits at the zenith of modern physics and engineering.
Absolutely. Before we even get into how they did it, I think we need to spend some time making sure everyone grasps the sheer physics involved here. What is EUV lithography, and why has it been so notoriously difficult to master?
Okay, think of it this way. Traditional lithography uses visible or deep ultraviolet light to print circuits onto silicon. As chips get smaller and more powerful, you need a smaller wavelength of light to draw thinner lines.
Makes sense. A finer pen for a finer drawing.
Exactly. EUV uses light with a wavelength of just 13.5 nanometers. To give you some context, that is so short it falls between X-rays and ultraviolet light on the spectrum.
It's a wavelength that doesn't even exist naturally here on Earth, really.
Not in any usable form. It's hundreds of times shorter than the light in your average laser pointer. And this capability is absolutely non-negotiable for producing the most advanced chips, anything below, say, 5 nanometer feature sizes.
Which is everything you need for cutting-edge AI, high-performance computing, the fastest smartphones.
All of it.
And the challenge isn't just generating that specific wavelength, it's making sure it actually hits the silicon cleanly, right?
Exactly. That's the real nightmare. Everything. Literally everything wants to absorb 13.5 nanometer light. Normal glass lenses, they absorb it instantly.
So no lenses.
No lenses. Even the air absorbs it. This is why the entire process has to take place in an ultra-high vacuum. We're talking about the lowest pressure environment on Earth, an environment rivaled only by deep space.
Okay, so you have this perfect vacuum. How do you even generate the light?
This is maybe the single most difficult industrial process ever invented. You take tiny droplets of molten tin, about 30 microns across, drop them into the vacuum chamber, and then you hit them twice with a massive industrial CO2 laser. Twice. The first pulse is low power. It just shapes the tin droplet perfectly. The second pulse is incredibly high power. It vaporizes the droplet into a plasma that reaches temperatures around 200,000 degrees Celsius.
Oh, insane.
It's about 40 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And that plasma, in that specific instant, emits the exact 13.5 nanometer light you need.
So recreating the sun in the backyard shed, the analyst I met wasn't that far off the mark, at least conceptually.
Not at all. And once you generate this intense light, the engineering nightmare doesn't end. Now you have to focus it.
Right, because you can't use lenses.
Precisely. Since the light is absorbed by everything, you have to use mirrors. And these aren't mirrors you can just, buy off the shelf. These are stacks of 80 layers of alternating silicon and molybdenum materials, deposited with atomic precision.
Atomic precision.
For the EUV system to work, this light has to bounce off over 10 of these different mirrors. And if just one mirror is off by even a few picometers, that's a fraction of the size of a single hydrogen atom, the entire system fails.
And this is the part of the supply chain that was, until recently, completely monopolized by Germany's Carl Zeiss, ASML's partner.
They are arguably the only entity in the world capable of manufacturing these perfect, non-absorbing mirrors at scale. It's an incredible bottleneck.
So you look at that complexity, and then you look at the timeline. ASML took nearly 20 years, billions of euros in R&D, and the consolidated expertise of European and American suppliers just to go from their first working prototype in 2001 to commercial availability in 2019.
A massive global effort.
And now we're seeing China achieve the critical operational milestone, the light generation, in roughly 7 years, under total trade restriction. That just speaks to an entirely different kind of resource mobilization.
It does. The analogy of the Manhattan Project is used a lot, and it's because it underscores this sense of national, almost existential priority. This isn't just about commercial competition for that.
It's about technological sovereignty.
In a critical domain, yes. The entire 6-year initiative to achieve this became a top priority for the central leadership. The immense resource deployment was handled with wartime-level secrecy, all coordinated under the Central Science and Technology Commission.
So we hear the prototype was operational in early 2025 in that high-security lab in Shenzhen. What's the official status, and what does this new accelerated timeline look like?
Well, the critical initial step is done. The machine is successfully generating and utilizing EUV light. That means they have solved the tin laser plasma problem and the initial focusing challenge, which is huge.
But as you said, it hasn't produced working chips yet. That's the next mountain to climb.
That's the massive next hurdle: yield, precision, reliability. But getting the light working shatters all the external timelines. ASML's CEO suggested China would need many, many years. Analysts had settled on a decade, maybe more. Now, the government is targeting working chips by 2028. The more, let's say, pragmatic goal is 2030. But even that pragmatic goal is years ahead of what global observers thought was possible before the sanctions were fully in place.
That speed is incredible, but it seems like it came at an engineering cost, just judging by the prototype's physical description. We know ASML's systems are huge, but they're still optimized school bus size, 180 tons.
Right.
The Chinese prototype is described as crude and many times larger. What does that monstrous physical footprint tell us about the engineering trade-offs they had to make?
It tells you everything. It speaks to a purely functional brute force engineering philosophy. The courses suggest that when their initial attempts to replicate the compact size and the elegant optical train of the Western systems failed.
Probably because they couldn't get those ultra-precision components, like the Zeiss mirrors.
That's the most likely reason. When that failed, the focus shifted. The engineers decided to prioritize power and light generation efficiency over miniaturization and finesse.
So if you can't get the perfect, small, high-reflectivity mirror, you just compensate by building a much larger system that gives you more room to work with less precise components.
Exactly. A slightly imperfect mirror might require a longer focal distance, or maybe a more complex array of other mirrors to clean up the optical aberrations. If you can't achieve perfection in a tight space, you build a hall-size system that allows for that compensation.
More room for complex piping, larger vacuum chambers.
And potentially larger, less efficient light sources that require a ton more cooling. It's a classic engineering solution.
Yeah.
You sacrifice size, cost, and energy efficiency to achieve the core functionality. The goal was simply to make the system operational, to get it generating in that 13.5 nanometer light, even if the machine fills an entire factory floor.
Elegance was irrelevant.
Sovereignty was the only metric that mattered.
That distinction-sacrificing finesse for function is just a profound lesson in strategic engineering. And it leads us directly into the next question. How did they manage to centralize this effort and cut that proverbial Gordian knot of the supply chain so quickly? The answer seems to be this systematic deployment of the whole-of-nation system.
That centralized coordination is the absolute key. It's the structural mechanism that made this rapid timeline possible. When you're facing a technical challenge that requires merging dozens of highly specialized fields, from quantum physics and nanomechanics to high-power laser tech and material science, the traditional walls between academia and industry, they just have to fall immediately.
I think that anecdote of the veteran physicist and the young engineer perfectly illustrates this kind of state-mandated synergy.
It's the perfect microcosm of the whole systemic change. You can just picture it. A late-night session at his Shanghai research facility. On one side, you have a veteran physicist from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Maybe he's dedicated 30 years to the deep theory of light interaction, probably used to a slower, more academic pace.
And on the other side?
On the other, you've got a 30-year-old lead engineer from a private optics startup. Someone who's driven by intense deadlines, rapid prototyping, the whole commercial sector mindset.
Under normal circumstances, those two people might be competing for the same funding pool, publishing separately, or they might just never even cross paths in their entire careers.
But under this centralized coordination framework, they are mandated collaborators. The physicist provides the deep theoretical foundation, the why of the light source physics. That prevents the team from wasting years on fundamentally flawed concepts.
And the young engineer brings the relentless commercial drive, the knowledge of industrial application, the critical, how fast can we build this component?
Exactly.
So what specific immediate friction points does a system like that solve? Because, in Silicon Valley, moving basic science from a university lab to an industrial application can take years. There are legal hurdles, funding, intellectual property battles.
It just vaporizes all of that friction instantly. First, IP and procurement. Since the mission is national, there are no IP conflicts between the CAS Institute and the private manufacturer. The IP belongs to the state's mission.
Okay, that's huge.
And second, funding and procurement are accelerated to an unimaginable degree. If that engineer needs a specialized component from the academic lab, or if the physicist needs massive computational resources from the industrial partner, the Central Science and Technology Commission can just mandate that immediate resource transfer.
It bypasses all the bureaucracy.
It bypasses bureaucratic delays, shareholder concerns, market competition, everything. This is where the systematic efficiency of the whole-of-nation approach really shines. It achieves a synergy that bridges theory and reality almost overnight.
That level of authority requires some serious top-down leadership. We know the 6-year initiative is a top priority of President Xi Jinping. What does that coordination structure actually look like on the ground? Specifically, who is managing this massive, sprawling network of thousands of engineers, universities, and research institutes?
The structure is highly centralized, and the electronics giant, Huawei, plays a central and really indispensable role. Huawei is acting as the primary coordinator. They're essentially managing the entire web of companies and state research institutes involved.
That is a fascinating choice. Why Huawei? A single corporation coordinating national research institutes seems unusual.
Huawei's position is unique. They're not just an electronics company. They're integral to the country's entire digital infrastructure. They are involved in every single step of the semiconductor supply chain, from designing the chips that go into their own products to developing the fabrication equipment, all the way to manufacturing the final integrated systems.
So by putting them in the center, you're connecting basic research directly to end-user demand.
Precisely. And it also lends itself to maximum secrecy. We know that CEO Ren Zhengfei himself is required to brief senior Chinese leaders directly on the progress of this highly sensitive project.
So it's a tight loop.
A very tight loop. The teams working on this are isolated. Employees often sleep on site at these high-security facilities. They face restricted phone and network access. This organizational structure is less like traditional R&D and much more like a dedicated, unified industrial military effort focused on a single technological goal.
To really understand the scientific power driving this, we have to talk about the Chinese Academy of Sciences, C. This is where the core research capacity lives. Can you tell us more about the sheer scale of this academic engine?
CAS is not just a university system, it's a colossal engine. It's made up of 115 research institutes, 3 universities, numerous high-tech companies, and think tanks. It is the scientific backbone for this entire national effort.
And the data shows it's not just big, it's globally dominant in STEM research volume.
Overwhelmingly so. Let's break down those numbers because they are striking.
Please do.
Between 2010 and 2022, CAS was the top global producer of STEM research in terms of sheer paper volume. They published an incredible 759,271 papers.
To put that in context, that surpasses major global academic systems, including the entire University of California system.
By a wide margin. But, sheer volume can sometimes be misleading. What truly indicates research quality is the production of highly cited papers, the ones that significantly influence their fields.
The ones other scientists are actually reading and building on.
Right. And CAS produced 191,451 highly cited papers in that same time frame, again, leading all other global research institutions. This rise in impactful, high-quality research is the foundation upon which this whole EUV breakthrough was built.
This level of production has to require resources. We can't talk about a focused national priority without discussing the financial muscle behind it. How has the state supported this CAS engine?
The financial commitment has been staggering. CAS's basic R&D expenditures have nearly quadrupled in the last decade, between 2012 and 2023. They reached 62.8 billion Chinese yuan in 2023.
For our listeners, that's approximately 8.9 billion US dollars.
8.9 billion, committed to basic research just within the CAS system for that 1 year. And critically, that figure accounted for 28% of all basic R&D spending in the entire country.
So this is not just throwing money at the wall.
No, this is a strategic, disproportionate channeling of national research funds toward one institution to drive key strategic outcomes.
And CAS has a specific structural way of making sure this massive investment isn't just generating abstract theory, but is aligned with industrial needs, the 135 guideline, right?
Correct. The CAS institutes adhere to this 135 guideline. It mandates a hyper-focused structure, one core R&D direction, 3 major breakthroughs expected within 5 to 10 years, and 5 key research priorities established every 5 years.
It's incredibly disciplined.
It forces specialization that's directly applicable to national needs, and the evidence is clear in their output. CAS institutes publish most frequently in the field of industrial technology, 35% of their papers in 2021. And within that, the most frequent subfield is automation and computer technology, which of course includes AI and lithography control systems. It ensures the basic science serves this strategic mission.
Let's zoom in on the specific breakthrough institutes related to the EUV optics.
We have 2 critical players here. First, there's the Changshan Institute of Optics, Fine Mechanics and Physics, or SCIOMP. SCIOMP was central to achieving the breakthrough in integrating the EUV light into the prototype's optical system. They're the ones who made the machine operational.
They solved a massive integration hurdle, and the talent drive related to SCIOMP just shows the severity of the priority.
Absolutely. To maintain this momentum, SCIOMP is aggressively recruiting top lithography talent. They're offering uncapped salaries and research grants up to 4 million yuan. That's about $560,000 USD for PhD researchers in lithography. And that's on top of additional personal subsidies. It's an all-out war for specialized expertise.
It is. And secondly, you have the Shanghai Institute of Optics, also under CAS. This institute housed the team led by a highly significant individual named Lin Nan.
And Lin Nan is the former head of light source technology at ASML.
The very same. His team filed 8 patents on EUV light sources in just 18 months. This just illustrates the speed and intensity of knowledge transfer when you combine institutional support with specialized, repatriated expertise.
And that transition brings us directly to the human capital side. The breakthrough was mathematically possible, it was financially supported, but it was physically realized because they had the people with the institutional memory. We're talking about this phenomenon of brain circulation.
This is the critical accelerant. Building a technology this complex from scratch in 7 years it's nearly impossible without the intimate, tacit knowledge possessed by engineers who have already worked inside the global monopoly.
You need people who know not just the schematics,
but the manufacturing tolerances, the specific failure modes, the tribal knowledge that's been accumulated over decades within ASML and its key suppliers.
The story of Dr. Liu, the engineer who left a premier European firm after 2 decades, seems to capture the psychological dimension of this shift. It wasn't just a mercenary move for a bigger paycheck.
No. Our sources describe his return as answering the pull of brain circulation. It's a search for purpose, tied to a national mission, alongside, yes, very competitive compensation. These experts are drawn back by the allure of being at the absolute center of the world's most difficult technological puzzle.
Backed by seemingly unlimited resources.
And with the chance to achieve national self-reliance. For the nations losing this talent, it's not just a loss of personnel, it's the erosion of decades of accumulated, highly sensitive technical knowledge.
And this repatriation isn't just accidental or informal, it's systematic, replacing older, more public programs.
Correct. The high-profile Thousand Talents Plan, or TTP, attracted over 7,000 participants by 2018, but it faced a lot of external scrutiny. So it has since evolved into more discreet, more focused initiatives.
And the primary replacement program is called Quaming,
which means enlightenment. This program is highly targeted, and it deliberately operates in the shadows. It's absent from public-facing government websites to protect the identity of its participants.
So how does the Quaming program focus its efforts on fields like semiconductors, and what does it offer to successfully lure top talent away from established, comfortable Western careers?
Quaming targets high-end experts, particularly those in sensitive or classified fields. And the financial incentives are enormous. They're immediately life-changing. We're talking about typical signing bonuses that range from 3 to 5 million yuan.
That's about 420,000 to 700,000 US dollars.
On top of substantial home purchase subsidies and research autonomy. For an engineer with 2 decades of expertise, this offers both immediate financial security and the chance to lead a well-funded, high-stakes project.
And the targeting for the EUV project was laser-focused on those who are perhaps easier to recruit or possess the most critical, intimate knowledge.
That's the strategic brilliance of the recruitment. The team they assembled for that highly secret Shenzhen lab included Chinese-born engineers and scientists who were recently retired, or close to retirement, from firms like ASML.
So they retain all that deep institutional knowledge, but face fewer professional constraints or non-compete concerns.
Exactly. Their expertise was crucial for reverse engineering the systems. They didn't need a perfect blueprint. They had the people who knew why the blueprints worked the way they did and where all the critical manufacturing tolerances lay. We're even seeing reports that recruits in that secured facility were instructed to use aliases and issued fake IDs to maintain project confidentiality.
This massive human capital push isn't confined just to lithography, is it? It's transforming the entire science and technology landscape. Let's shift our focus for a second and look at the returns in foundational areas like mathematics and AI, which ultimately underpin advanced lithography. I mean, why does the return of a world-class mathematician matter for building a chip machine?
That's a crucial question. Mathematics, especially applied math, forms the bedrock of computational lithography. That's the software that corrects for manufacturing imperfections and calculates how patterns should be printed onto silicon.
So better math means better chips from the same machine.
Precisely. The return of Yaxing Tung in 2022 was a seismic event in the academic world. He's a Fields Medalist, which is arguably the highest honor in mathematics, and he was a professor emeritus at Harvard.
A Fields Medalist leaving Harvard is not a normal career move.
No, it is not. He returned to direct the Yale Mathematical Sciences Center at Tsinghua University. His motivation was twofold: a desire to mentor the next generation of Chinese mathematical talent, and the sheer scale of China's investment in foundational mathematics. It's a strategic investment.
So foundational research creates a systemic advantage, even if it's not directly visible on the factory floor. What about nanomechanics? That deals with the material science of these tiny components.
And that is where the structural integrity and precision of the machine components come into play. Gao Huajin is a leading figure in mechanical engineering and nanomechanics. He's a member of both the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Sciences in the U.S.
And he returned to Tsinghua
in 2024 to lead research in this area. His expertise is directly relevant to mastering the material science challenges of those EUV mirrors and the ultra-precise stages that hold the silicon wafer, the kind of component precision that previously only firms like Carl Zeiss had mastered.
We also saw the return of Chen Gang in nanotechnology. That seems closely tied to both chip architecture and the massive energy demands of these machines.
It is. Chen Gang, who is a professor at MIT and a National Academy of Engineering member, returned to the South China University of Technology in 2022. His specialization is in nanoscale heat transfer and thermoelectric technology.
And heat management is critical.
Absolutely critical. The more power dense your chip is, the more heat it generates. Poorly managed heat just ruins performance and longevity. His work applying U.S.-developed expertise in thermal engineering directly contributes to the viability of these advanced domestic chips.
And then, of course, AI. The whole goal of this chip drive is to power the next generation of artificial intelligence, but AI is also used to build the chips, isn't it?
It absolutely is. AI is being integrated into process control and defect correction in the lithography process, computational lithography, essentially. And the push in AI innovation has been relentless, evidenced by major returns like Zhu Songjun in 2020. He left UCLA to found the Beijing Institute for General Artificial Intelligence, or BIGI, with the explicit goal of building a national AGI ecosystem.
And the practical application side of AI is also seeing significant leadership returns.
Yes. Yaqin Zheng, a chair professor at Tsinghua and a former Microsoft executive, returned in 2020. He is now the dean of the Institute for AI Industry Research, AAIR. His whole role is to drive AI industry applications, bridging that gap between academic AI research and commercial reality.
Reinforcing that whole-of-nation synergy we talked about.
And we also have Guojin Qi, who returned in 2025 to Westlake University. He left high-level roles at IBM and Huawei Research America. He now leads the MAPL lab there, and his motivation highlights the draw of China's booming AI ecosystem and the autonomy to pursue these large-scale research projects that might be fragmented or underfunded elsewhere.
If you look at this whole collection of talent, from a Fields medalist in math to leaders in AI and nanomechanics, it just demonstrates this focused, systemic effort to fill every single foundational hole in the knowledge base required for technological sovereignty. This concentration of expertise is the ultimate fuel for that rapid timeline acceleration.
And this talent flows directly back into the core research institutes, creating what you could call powerful centers of gravity for innovation. For example, the CAS Institutes published over 23,000 AI-related papers between 2010 and 2021. That's more than twice the volume of the next leading institution globally.
Wow!
You have institutes like the Institute of Automation that dedicate over 70% of their papers to AI research. That combination of specialization, centralized funding, and repatriated expertise is why they achieved the impossible milestone years early.
Okay, let's pivot now to the final critical section, the remaining path to commercialization and scale. The prototype is operational, it's generating light. But ASML systems produce millions of chips annually with incredibly high yield rates. How do they transition this crude, massive prototype into a refined, mass-producible machine that's capable of competing?
This is the massive remaining hurdle, and it all comes back to the material science of the supply chain. The core difficulty, as we established, remains those ultra-precision optics. The prototype is functional, but it lags behind ASML because researchers have yet to secure or successfully replicate the perfect optical systems, particularly those from Carl Zeiss.
Scaling up the production of those perfect multi-layer mirrors is a monumental material science challenge.
It is. The brute force functional approach got them the prototype, but refinement requires either acquiring or mastering that specific mirror technology.
So what resourcefulness are we seeing in them overcoming these component restrictions?
We're seeing a highly resourceful, multifaceted strategy. It's aimed at acquiring both components and component knowledge. Firstly, there's active salvaging. Teams are securing components from older, decommissioned ASML deep ultraviolet and even older EUV machines obtained through international channels,
allowing them to examine and utilize parts that are no longer restricted.
Right. And secondly, the secondhand market plays a surprisingly crucial role here.
Really?
It does. Parts are being sourced through secondhand markets via these extensive networks of intermediary companies designed to mask the ultimate buyer. International banks and asset management firms regularly auction off older semiconductor fab equipment when companies upgrade or go under. We've seen listings for this equipment even on domestic platforms like Alibaba Auction as recently as late 2025.
It's a legal gray area for acquiring highly restricted, high-precision components.
And thirdly, there is the utilization of components from other sources that are still subject to export control, but are slightly older or from different product lines. Reports indicate the use of export-restricted components from Japan's Nikon and Canon, which, while not as advanced as ASML's latest iterations, still provide valuable reference points and functional pieces for their prototype development.
This sounds like a continuous, highly granular effort to gain knowledge from every angle possible, and this external acquisition strategy seems to be paired with a dedicated internal knowledge acquisition effort, these systematic reverse engineering teams.
This internal effort is perhaps the most impressive long-term strategy. Sources describe dedicated teams, sometimes around 100 recent university graduates, who are focused solely on disassembling and reassembling components from both EUV and older DUV lithography machines.
So they are essentially training an entire generation of engineers on the inner workings of foreign technology.
Exactly. This is knowledge internalization at scale. These engineers work under surveillance, with individual cameras documenting their desks, meticulously recording the process of disassembly and successful reassembly. Staffers who successfully reassembled a highly complex component receive substantial bonuses.
It ensures that the expertise isn't just held by a few repatriated experts, but is institutionalized and distributed among the next generation of engineers. It guarantees long-term capability.
That systematic approach, financial commitment, centralization, brain circulation, and this granular reverse engineering is what compressed a decades-long process into 7 years. And that mobilization is now creating a new, verifiable reality. The existence of a working EUV prototype is the most tangible evidence of this intensive, focused 6-year pressure campaign.
You know, I think the description from that technician describing the silence in the clean room as the first automated mass production sequence began, it really speaks to the significance of this shift. It's the realization that the goal is no longer just trying to catch up, but successfully building a parallel infrastructure.
That moment signifies the transition from a purely technical exercise to establishing the foundation for a multipolar technological world. For years, the global digital future was dependent on a single, fragile lithography bottleneck centered in one European country. That geopolitical strategy has now been fundamentally challenged.
The ultimate strategic implication here is technological plurality. What does the success of this breakthrough ensure for the global digital future?
It ensures resiliency. In a world where supply chains are increasingly weaponized, breaking this single point of failure introduces plurality. Future advancements in AI, 5G, and essential digital infrastructure will no longer be dictated solely by the geopolitical whims of one bloc.
So when one nation can independently master the core tools of modern chip manufacturing,
it results in a more robust and diverse global supply chain that is less susceptible to centralized disruption. China's progress moves it decisively toward sovereignty in a field that was previously monopolized by the West.
let's quickly connect the dots one last time, synthesizing the systematic advantages that fueled this achievement.
Well, the ability to mobilize capital and talent at this scale is just unmatched. Remember the financial foundation. The Chinese Academy of Sciences basic R&D quadrupled in the last decade, reaching that $8.9 billion figure in 2023. That accounted for 28% of all national basic R&D spending. That level of commitment shows you the strategic priority.
And that capital is deployed with incredible discipline.
Exactly. The CAS Institutes, guided by policies like the 135 guideline, ensure that this massive financial support is channeled into focused innovation. By specializing heavily in industrial technology and automation, the entire research engine is aligned to accelerate outcomes in those strategically critical fields like EUV lithography and AI.
The low, persistent hum of those massive cooling fans in Shenzhen is delivering a resounding message to the world. The existence of an operational EUV prototype is a clear demonstration that intense, sustained pressure, when channeled through a unified national system and backed by repatriated world-class talent, can accelerate indigenous innovation far beyond the timelines predicted by global experts. The challenge now shifts entirely from building the technically impossible to mastering the execution and scaling necessary to define a technologically pluralistic future achieved in 7 years what the rest of the world was sure it would take 30.